Certified financial planner professionals are certified to provide comprehensive financial planning that can address just about any facet of one's financial life, including retirement, estate planning, taxes, education, and more. For more info, go to letsmakeaplan.org to find a CFP professional for you.
We are back in Better Than Ever. Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and so the decision is in. Our top story on a day filled with big ones. The path has been cleared for Zeke Elliott to play week 1, but Zeke not cleared at all. His suspension of 6 games upheld in its entirety. And so once again, Mike, it feels like this is just the beginning of another long fight.
Yeah. We've just decided we're going to court. Again, we know a couple of things. Obviously, we'll get more into this, that we're going to court for this, but Zeke will. I'm sure all the Giants are pretty ecstatic that he will be there. Though the Giants, I'm sure, could care less. The Giants beat him twice in the regular season and had one of the top defenses, not the top defense. So they don't care. I mean, they'll play against anybody. I mean, so
you think they genuinely don't care at all?
Listen. If it's one, here's the thing: they can't control it, so there's no sense in complaining about it. If Zeke wasn't there, they'd be fine with it. They'd say, okay, they're down a man. We'll take advantage of that. Zeke's there. We just got to play with him. It's one of those things where there's no sense or no real reason to have a thought about it because you can't control it. He's either there or he's not. You can't control anything about it, so you know he's going to be there. So, you stopped him last year. You beat him twice. You say you're going to do the same thing this year. But we'll see where this thing goes and the history in the courts when the union takes the league to court and where this will go. That's why we'll bring on people that use much bigger words than us to try and explain all that, but we'll have them use small words. I love the sign stealing thing going on. I think my son Mike had the perfect analogy to it when we talk about that a bit. And I watched a ton of Venus Williams last night move on to the semifinals against Sloane Stephens, another American, which we'll get into as well. But that was fun to watch.
So let's do it, actually. Why don't we start with Off the Top and just go through some of these stories. And by the way, those of you just getting home in Boston after a long night at the ballpark, get yourselves some coffee, and we'll try and put on a good show for you today. Red Sox over the Blue Jays in 19 innings.
How about that? 19 innings, the longest game in baseball in terms of innings this season. The previous was 18. Longest road game in Blue Jays franchise history, tied for their longest game ever. I mean, 6 hours to play, second longest games in terms of Fenway Park history in terms of time, 1 minute behind a 20 inning loss to the Mariners in 1981. So you got to always love those games. We talked about this a while ago. Do you put a cap on games, 12 innings, and call it a day, or you keep playing these out? Obviously, you don't get a lot of these, so you're not going to sit there and say, oh, my God, here we go with a 19-inning game. We have to get rid of this.
Well, I mean, it was part of the discussion. Maybe in part because it happens so seldom. Would it be okay to have a game end in a tie after 12 innings as opposed to now at this point of the season, these teams have called up so many players. They have so many more options to go to. But as far as what it does to a team's pitching staff and overall player health and whatever else, it could be disproportionately important if it happens in May or in June. When it happens in September, maybe less so.
I just don't think it happens enough to change a whole thing. In my opinion.
I don't want to get sidetracked into this. I disagree with you.
Yeah, no, I know you do.
But because I think the fact that it happens as seldom as it does is the reason to do it. I wouldn't want 40 ties in a season.
Right.
I wouldn't mind one. If you have each team winds up with one tie in a season, I don't think it's the end of the world.
Yet again, we disagree.
Off the Top.
Meanwhile, there's nothing to disagree about with these two teams. The Indians and the Diamondbacks are as hot as you can possibly be, candidly. They're as hot as any two teams have ever been at the same time in baseball history.
There you go. 13th straight win for the Indians. The Diamondbacks have won 12 straight. It's the second time two teams have a winning streak of 12 or more games at the same time in the modern era. Again, that's since 1900. The Braves and Tigers headed into games on August 9th of 2013 with winning streaks of 13 and 12, respectively. The Diamondbacks, let's take it a step further. They've gone 10 straight games without trailing. They've led for 98 innings. 98 innings they haven't trailed. It's very, very impressive. And the Indians are the first team with a 13-game win streak in back-to-back seasons since 1960.
Off the Top.
Golick said he was watching Venus yesterday. She's on to the semifinals where she'll play Sloane Stephens And Golick, we have the possibility of an all-American women's semifinal at the U.S. Open, which would be incredible. It would be the first time it had happened in more than 30 years.
Yeah, for a little while. First, let's start with this side of it. We have Williams and Sloane Stephens in the semifinals. It's the first All-American U.S. Open semifinal since 2002. Serena Williams and Lindsay Davenport. Venus, the third oldest to reach the semis in a women's major in the open era. Billie Jean King is the oldest. She did it 2 times at over 39 and over 38. And then Martina Navratilova was pushing the end of 37, where Venus is just beginning at 37. As far as the second semifinal, if we can get the other 2 women in it, the last time you mentioned it, do you know the 4 that were in it?
It says here it was Wimbledon of 1985. So if it's 85, that's going to be Chrissy. Martina Navratilova at that point, I think, was not playing as an American, right? I don't know at what point she became an American citizen. She was, so she counts.
So you got 2.
So it was the 2 of them.
Yeah, I mean, those are the 2 that you could probably.
Could it possibly have been someone like Zina Garrison?
Zina Garrison was the 3rd. You'll never get the Kathy Rinaldi.
Okay, yeah, I would not have gotten that.
Yeah, Kathy Rinaldi. So that was 1985 Wimbledon when we had All-American in the semis.
Yeah, listen, there was young people listening to this program may not realize this. This was a time when Americans dominated professional tennis on both the men's and women's side of things. It feels like a very long time ago.
For Stephen, she's the first American woman not named Venus or Serena Williams to reach the U.S. Open semi since 2004.
Well, I mean, that my line was literally about to be, there was a time that we had other great American tennis players whose last name wasn't Williams.
Right.
And it has not been that way, as you just pointed out, for a long time.
Was Lindsay Davenport and Jennifer Capriati.
Yeah, we had Roddick and we had Todd Martin on the men's side, and that's about
Off
it. All right, on we go. The U.S. and Honduras in a 1-1 tie, Mike, in World Cup qualifying, and it was very close to being a disastrous performance for the American team.
Yeah, we got that goal. Bobby Wood got in the 85th minute. That would have been absolutely brutal had they lost that one. So 2 more games. They played 8 of 10 games in the Hex. 2 more. They play Panama October 6th and October 10th, Trinidad and Tobago. They play right now. United States sits 4th with 9 points. Panama has 10. Costa Rica 15. Mexico's already there. They 18 points. They pretty much got it squared away.
Off the top.
And finally, as we mentioned right off the top, Zeke Elliott, 6-game suspension, upheld by an arbitrator, though he is eligible to play Sunday against the Giants. Let's dive into that. Mike and our Off the Top is presented by Progressive Insurance. You could save hundreds on your car, your business, or your recreational vehicle insurance from a local independent agent. Go to Progressive.com today. Now that's Progressive. Before we get deeply into Zeke here, let's set up our social topic for today. Mm-hmm. Since the 12-team playoff format in the National Football League was adopted in 1990, so it's a significant sample size, a very minimum of 4 teams have qualified for the postseason every single year that were not in it the year before. It is a minimum of 4 in and 4 out.
Right.
So as we embark upon another season of NFL action, we ask you to use the hashtag 4in4out, the digit 4. 4 in, 4 out. And name for us, just write up the names of the 4 teams that are going to get in this year that weren't, and the 4 teams that were in last year that will be out. Again, we have that program that we can calculate the most frequently mentioned names,
right,
and we'll see what everybody thinks. So 4 in, 4 out is the hashtag.
That's always
today.
Great to do. Again, so the 4 that you think will make it that weren't in last year, and obviously the 4 that were in last year that you don't think will make it. It's been amazing how that is held for that amount of years. It just happens. You sit there and you go through it, and you're like, it's just like the NCAA tournament. If you're just going to use that one sheet, I pick a lot of sheets, but there's that one money sheet.
The sheet of integrity.
You tend to go a little more chalk on that, and you have the one sheet, so a lot of times you do just go chalk, and that's kind of where you go when you pick, but you just have to realize it happens every year. Sometimes you just can't bring yourself to do it, and yet it finds a way of happening all the time.
So we'll try and have some fun with that today. Again, the hashtag 4in4out. Just name the 4 teams that you believe will be in the playoffs this year that weren't a year ago, and the 4 teams that they will replace. Okay, as we told you, Zeke Elliott's 6-game suspension has been upheld by the arbitrator Harold Henderson. I have both Henderson and Zeke's lawyers in their entirety from Shefty on Facebook. Here we go. This is Henderson. As his designated hearing officer in this matter, my responsibility is to determine whether the commissioner's decision on discipline is arbitrary and capricious, meaning was it made on unreasonable grounds or without any proper consideration of circumstances. It is not within the responsibility nor within the authority of the hearing officer, to conduct a de novo review of the case and second-guess his decision. It goes on from there, but that's the most important part of this you need to know. Every single year we go into these, and we act as though Harold Henderson, or ultimately when this gets in front of a judge, are going to decide whether the league made the right decision when it comes to Zeke Elliott.
Retrying the case, yeah.
And that is not what is happening here. All they are deciding is whether or not they followed their procedure correctly, because the rule says, and it has only been strengthened, that basically Roger Goodell can do whatever he wants when it comes to areas of player discipline. So Harold Henderson wasn't going over the facts of the case and deciding whether Zeke Elliott was guilty or not. He was just deciding whether the decision was arbitrary and capricious, and he upheld the 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this is about. And it's a good explanation and good for people to know that, well, how does Harold Henderson not see that that the witness was contriving things, and just like the one investigator had said, and wasn't truthful, and why can't? That's not his job. That's not what he is to do here. He's to follow procedure, and did the NFL follow procedure here? And they have a pretty wide berth of the procedure they're going to follow. They have a committee. The committee recommended something. Roger Goodell ultimately gets to make the decision. That's their procedure. Harold Henderson said they upheld that procedure. I'm not here for guilt or innocence, so the suspension is upheld. That's what I had thought all along. My thought was, why would you drop it if you did that long investigation, unless you worked out some deal? And even if you worked out the deal of saying it goes to 3, don't go to court, I wouldn't be sure why the NFL would do it outside of, we don't want to go to court again, is we get to do the power. We have the power. That's not going to change. It's 6 games. Take your best shot at us again.
The only reason not to want to go to court is for the same reason that the players want to go to court, which is every time it goes to court, it is theoretically a challenge.
You have a chance
of the
to
commissioner's
lose,
power.
Yeah.
And you might not want to lose that, but I think they're so confident.
Yeah, I think so as well.
In its solidity, or whatever the word is, that they're not afraid of that.
And from the other side, I completely get the union. This is the way the union, there's players. Leverage is Aaron Donald. Player, withhold your services from a team. That's your leverage. What's the best leverage that you have? And because of the CBA in this particular situation, the only real way the union can fight something is wait for the league to do something, disagree with it, and try and take them to court and get them on a procedure to get them to lose some of that power, or say they did something wrong.
This from Zeke Elliott's attorneys. We are extremely disappointed with Mr. Henderson's inability to navigate through league politics and follow the evidence, and most importantly, his conscience. The evidence that Mr. Elliott and his team presented on appeal clearly demonstrated that Mr. Elliott was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by the NFL and its officers to keep exonerating evidence from the decision makers, including the advisors and Roger Goodell. The only just decision was to overturn the suspension in its entirety. Mr. Elliott is looking forward to his day in federal court, where the playing field will be level and the NFL will have to answer for its unfair and unjust practices. Again, look at the specific wording and all of this. They're all different things that you can anticipate they will be using in court. And if you're with us Friday or anywhere around the media Friday, you heard exactly what it is they're arguing, that the only person who was the lead investigator in this, who interviewed the accuser 6 different times, was not in the meeting where the conversation about discipline was had with Roger Goodell.
Just for factual, I think Lisa Friel was the lead investigator. I don't believe this.
Okay, let me rephrase that. The person who handled the portion of the investigation, who interviewed the accuser.
Because did you see how the league had put it? They said she was a junior investigator, and Lisa Friel was the senior investigator.
Fair enough. So I shouldn't say lead.
Just from the
you're correct.
Yeah.
That was my word. That was not the word. The investigator who interviewed the accuser, and the only one who did, was not in the room, and thus and subsequently recommended 0 games of discipline. Was not in the room, and the union claimed and claims, and you hear the lawyers now using the word that this was a conspiracy, and the league, again, strongly disputes that, denies that, and says the commissioner was well aware of that recommendation. Where do we stand?
Well, he said going to court. And so the only 2 factual things we know is right now the suspension was upheld. That was the decision made by Harold Henderson. And Zeke Elliott can play in week 1. Now, it's not a written rule, but it always kind of been the league's thought process from a competitive standpoint that if it goes past 4 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesday, that any suspensions will start the following week and that player is eligible for this week. And that, I guess, supposedly was determined early on in this meeting that from the court side of it, that the judge says it's going to take me time to look at all this stuff. So can we agree we're not getting a decision here that Zeke can play in week 1, and that was agreed to. So that's the two factual things right now. Is the suspension was upheld to 6 games. We'll see where that goes, but that's where it is now. And Zeke plays against the Giants in week 1. So there are you fantasy players out there. You got your running back.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there are so many people out there that could care less about this other than the fact that Zeke will be on the field if they have drafted Zeke on their fantasy team.
Oh, and let the conspiracy theorists also run wild with that's a huge nationally televised first Sunday night game of the season. Enormous glamour game between the glamorous Cowboys and the New York Giants. It's one of the biggest games of the year in its own way. And now all of a sudden the big star will be there, and then he'll get suspended, and then he'll be back again in time for everything else that we care about. So let the conspiracy theorists go with that as well.
Sure, put on the tinfoil hat.
Let's go at the mics. It's brought to you by Dave & Buster's. Watch the games and play the games at your football headquarters, Dave & Buster's. Let's start with Ryan Smith, legal analyst, ABC and ESPN. His thoughts on what Zeke has in store for him in court.
I think it's the legal equivalent of a Hail Mary pass at this point. I don't think he's got a great chance. Here's the reason why. You can't ask a court to do something based on something that hasn't happened yet. Essentially, his team is going into court and saying, we expect Harold Henderson to rule in a way that we won't like, so courts, stop that from happening, let my guy play. This controversy for courts isn't ripe yet. Usually courts will wait to the arbitrator to decide, wait for that process to run its course, and then they're willing to consider it. So on that basis, the stay is very tough for Zeke Elliott to get.
We will have Ryan Smith on at a little after 9 o'clock Eastern time on the show, and he does such a good job of explaining things the way, let's just say, that I can understand.
Yes.
Which means most of America then can understand and really understand where this is going to go.
Next, we have Chris Mortensen with his thoughts from inside the National Football League on Zeke's chances in court.
I expect it to be 6 games. And here's why. First of all, they're not going to negotiate down. They have 2 major victories, and the most recent one, bringing in the Brady case, that basically upholds Article 46 of the collective bargaining agreement, which basically says that the commissioner has the authority, and under labor law, that authority holds up in a court. That was the Brady ruling in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. It was the same ruling in the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals in the Adrian Peterson case, in which both times they upheld the power, the authority of the commissioner, regardless whether you have a flawed process or whether the fundamental fairness issues are in question, which in this case you would say they are. And when you have such a recent appellate court ruling as Brady last year that says commissioner has the authority, we can't do anything, I think that's where it ends up, 6 games.
First, let me just say it's great to hear Mort's voice.
It sure is.
It is absolutely great to hear Mort's voice. That said, that's the next thing in this is nobody thinks Zeke can win. It's just a matter of how long can you hold off the loss. We saw Brady play the season, right? You want to go all the way back to, 2008, the Star Caps with Kevin and Pat Williams, the 2 interior linemen for the Minnesota Vikings. They held it off for a couple of seasons in court. So it and then they eventually lost. It didn't go their way with the suspension. At that point, one of them, I think, had retired. So that's what this is going to come down to, I believe, is how long do you hold this off before you serve your suspension? Is it you play the 1 game and then serve the suspension? Is there no stay granted here and you just say that's it? Or does this thing go on and on and on and the union want to keep trying to fight it? And again, I understand from their side trying to fight it. I absolutely do. It's the really only chance they have here. Keep fighting it and trying while Zeke keeps playing. And then at some point, if they don't win, like most people don't think they will, then a 6-game suspension is served.
Finally, at the mics, the one thing that most people seem willing to acknowledge, even those within the Cowboys, according to our Adam Schefter, is that while Zeke, whether he deserved a 6-game suspension or not for this circumstance, he's a young man who's got a lot of growing up and a lot of learning to do.
The Dallas Cowboys know that he's one of the most talented players in the NFL. But even the people within that organization know that Zeke Elliott has issues that he has to confront and deal with. He must grow up. He must make better decisions off the field. He's been involved in way too many instances that threatened his long-term future in the NFL, this being another example of that. And if you go through and read the testimony from his hearings in June, from his meetings with the league, there's all sorts of discussion and testimony about all sorts of personal experiences, choices, lifestyle choices that raise questions about the decision that he has made. And if that 6-game suspension does indeed hold up, that's 6 weeks that he will be away from the Dallas Cowboys training facility, 6 weeks where he will not have structure and discipline, and 6 weeks the Dallas Cowboys will be concerned about his well-being.
So, listen, he's not the first or the last that matures into being a professional, acting like a professional, okay? And you just look on that team, Des Bryant. At one point, there was a rotating 3-man security team to leave one man with Bryant at all times. I mean, this is supposed to be a professional athlete, that they have to have a 3-man rotating security team watching so he doesn't get into trouble. So, and again, Des Bryant isn't the only one. That this happens all the time. And understand with Zeke had some issues in college as well. The Cowboys knew about some of this, about some of what Zeke had done in the past. So it's not like they're like, oh, my God, I can't believe this is happening. And it just comes down to Darren Woodson was in here yesterday, and he's right. You can put the 3-man security rotation team on them. You can suspend him. You can take his money until a player wakes up and realizes that they need to grow up and mature. It's not going to happen. So this is going to be on Zeke. Zeke at some point will lose 6 games. He'll lose the money that goes along with it. His reputation will take a hit at some point. When does that person, and everybody has a different line, everybody goes into any pro sport or professional in life. You go into the professional world. I mean, how you act. When do you act professional in that job? And right now, Zeke Elliott is certainly not there.
And to be clear, we're talking about two separate things here.
Without question.
We've got an issue where the young man who has made a lot of really bad decisions, and then we have an issue of domestic violence.
Exactly. That's separate. Absolutely
Which
right.
will never be described here as a bad decision.
Never.
That's something entirely other than that, and that's what he's been suspended 6 games for.
Hey, everyone. Mike Golick here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT, home, safe home.
All right, there is only one Field Yates, and we've got him in studio with us right now talking football for a half hour as we go around the league. We got the hashtag 4 in, 4 out working this morning. We'll get Fields 4, both in and out again. Every year since they went to this new playoff format, which is 1990, so it's not that new, there have been at least 4 new teams in the playoffs. So before we're done with you, Yates, we will get your 4 in and 4 out, but we start, of course, with Zeke. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. How are you?
We're good.
Oh, well.
Mike, I'd like you to address one tweet that I was glancing at. And again, all the Twitter comes in through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Todd Clark tweets, when is the time NFL players finally say enough of Goodell and walk out? Everyone is sick of Goodell. Time to get him out. Explain why the players aren't going to walk out because Zeke Elliott's suspension was upheld.
Seriously, think about this. You're going to walk out. There's 2,000, let's throw in practice squad players. There's 2,000 players in the NFL. You get X amount that are suspended with no issue, right? They get suspended for PED or whatever and 4 games, and they don't fight it. They got caught. They sit their games. And then you go to the next level of people who are suspended, and they fight it. It's compared to the 2,000, it's a small amount. You tell me, as a person who was in the league for 9 years and I did use steroids before they were outlawed, so as far as the league was concerned, I never did anything illegal. I never had to go before the commissioner or here. I never got in trouble, and most of the guys I played with didn't. You're going to say, hey, yeah, walk out and miss game checks because of those couple of handfuls of players that get themselves into trouble, and we don't like the way the commissioner disciplines it. Not happening. Not happening. And that's why this should not be an issue in 2021 in the new CBA, where all 2,000 players dig in their heels and say, we're not going back to work if the league has all the power, because it only affects a small amount. You missing a paycheck? You missing a paycheck at your work, if you never get in trouble and about 5 guys compared to your workplace get in trouble and you don't like the discipline, doubt it. You may say it, but when all of a sudden you got to walk out and that check's supposed to come and it doesn't, not worth it to the majority of the players to say, this is where I'm choosing to miss my game check. Not going to happen.
You covered most of it, Golick, but this all in some way stems back to 2011 and the near lockout that we had in the NFL. They ended up agreeing to a new CBA in late July, and then training camps kicked off, and we had our season as planned, as scheduled. At that time, you think about some of the pressing issues that were discussed publicly as sticking points in the CBA. Amongst them, and not limited to, were the rookie wage scale of things, right? That was, you go from Matthew Stafford and Sam Bradford getting these huge monster contracts as number 1 overall pick to a more modest price point for guys like Cam Newton and Andrew Luck, etc. At the time, one of the issues was not the commissioner's legislation and his jurisdiction in all matters is to basically be the judge, jury, and executioner. So, unfortunately, this is in some ways a self-inflicted wound for upset players, disgruntled players like Zeke Elliott and others who may be furious about how this has been handled. They are not going to probably be able to do much until the next CBA round of talks. Oh, by the way, the commissioner just got a new deal, so those who don't want him there, good luck.
And from the glass half full side, the last time the players wanted to fight for something or get something, they got it.
Yeah.
They got off-season doesn't start till April. They got another 4 or 5 weeks of off-season before they had to get that. They got 14 padded practices during the regular season. That's it. They got a situation that was for all 2,000 players to have to basically be in off-season program less wear and tear on their body, and all 2,000 players to not have to only wear pads 14 times during the season. Look at it however you want. If you want to say that's helped or hurt the game, that's not the point. The point is the players wanted that, and they got that. So it's not like everything they fight for they don't get. We're all just looking at Article 46 and the power that the commissioner has, and it's a headline every time it happens to say, oh my God, how did the players not fight for that? The players have fought for some things they wanted, and they've won. Sometimes we had to do it, quite honestly, after we decertified and weren't a union, hence free agency back in 1993. But there are some victories the players get, and they got them the last time they negotiated some of the things they wanted.
And I don't think they're going back in on this in 2021, no matter what someone like Cyrus Mary tries to say, because it just isn't that important. At the end of the day, let's think about what we're talking about here, okay? This fight felt very different when it was about deflated footballs than it does when it's about beating up women. Yep. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about whether Zeke Elliott pulled down a woman's top at a Mardi Gras parade, or whether he's misbehaving in clubs. We're talking about domestic violence, something that in theory we should all want the NFL to be taking more seriously. Now, if there's any real criticism here, it's that where was 6 games for Josh Brown, and where was 6 games for Quincy Enunwa, and where was 6 games for Junior Gillette and all the rest of them. Yes. 6 games was the right decision by the NFL in the case of Zeke Elliott. That I don't think we should be having this fight over that.
Right. I think we are at the point now we are lumping Tom Brady and Zeke Elliott suspensions into the same boat because of the fact that it's going to both likely involve an extended legal battle. I think in the court of public opinion, some people believe that Tom Brady was being suspended for something that never happened. Like there was no, and if it did happen, it was almost as if deflated footballs, like slightly underinflated footballs. It's a decidedly different category than the nature of the incidents we're talking about with Zeke Elliott, potential domestic violence incidents. As you just said, Greeny, the NFL, we all applauded the NFL when a new domestic violence policy was introduced. Now, the NFL has sort of loosely enforced that since that time, headlined by the Josh Brown case when he was suspended for just 1 game. But if we're going to champion the NFL's cause of taking domestic violence more seriously, which we can universally agree upon, well, then when we have a situation where a player is suspended, we can't simultaneously cry foul because it felt like, the commissioner acted heavy-handed. You can't speak out of both sides of your mouth.
All right, Field Yates is here. He's brought to us this morning by DraftKings. Play free one-week fantasy football this Sunday at DraftKings. Just use the code Mike, only at DraftKings.com. And don't forget, you can hear Field Sundays on Operation Football with Andrew Hawkins, 1 through 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on the ESPN app. So all through all the games, he's giving you constant insight. But speaking of the fantasy part of this, because, again, you got to sort of keep diving back and forth between this is a really serious issue and it is also a football issue. Let's go to the football side of this. Zeke Elliott will get to play week 1. Then the assumption I think we're all making here is that he will be suspended 6 games. He's going to miss 6 games of this season. So if your fantasy draft still has not taken place, what does this mean for him?
Well, some context, just to sort of put it into real life, is last night we have our ESPN War Room League, which is 16 teams of a lot of our NFL staff. And there he goes. So that's a larger league, but I think he went pick 24 last night, Zeke Elliott did. So that's about where you're going to see Zeke Elliott go. And this was with the news. As a matter of fact, we had to delay the start of the draft because the news of Zeke Elliott came down. You had various people with commitments to SportsCenter and other, ESPN.com, et cetera, ESPN radio interviews to account for that news. That's about where he's going to probably end up going, Greeny. And I think that probably people are still taking him with the presumption, like you stated, that he's going to eventually sit 6 games. But you are seeing him in week 1 against the New York Giants, which, in terms of getting off on the right foot with your fantasy team, I suppose some people view that as a slight incremental benefit.
Well, plus, the Giants with that excellent defense. Here's the thing. We start up our DraftKings thing, you, me, and our group.
Yeah.
You think anybody's taking Zeke?
Well, why not? I mean, for week 1, I'll take him.
My point is, it's fun. One thing, look who he's playing.
Oh, against the Giants.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You'd say, oh, my God, Zeke's available. I'm going to take him. Playing the Giants.
That guy was money every week last year. It didn't make any difference what team they played. He somehow managed to wind up with 140 yards and at least 1 touchdown. I mean, every single week.
I mean, he was electric last season. He went up over 100 yards in their second meeting with the Giants, and in their first game, the Giants actually bottled them up okay. 20 carries, 51 yards,
he had
and
a
touchdown.
Too, right? That was the very first game.
Very first game.
His first game.
Whoa.
That was before Zeke became Zeke.
Yeah.
Now Zeke is Zeke.
They did bottle him up, but the expectation would be he would be a little better than that.
All right, we'll keep Field here because we have one other huge football issue to deal with, an entirely different sort, but we'll try and figure that one out, and then we will get Fields 4 in, 4 out. That's the hashtag this morning. Hashtag 4 in, 4 out. Just tweet us the names of the 4 teams you think are getting into the playoffs this year that weren't a year ago, and the names of the 4 teams they will replace.
Sports fans anywhere can earn a nationally recognized degree from Penn State. Online. Whether you're starting or finishing your degree, study where and when it's convenient for you. Choose from more than 125 programs to become a top prospect in your field and advance your career. Learn more at worldcampusinfo.com. Penn State World Campus, a world of possibilities. Online. Visit worldcampusinfo.com today. That's worldcampusinfo.com.
Mike and Mike, Field Yates is here. We're talking football with you. 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. The hashtag is 4 in, 4 out. We'll get to those in a moment. But first things first, and obviously of overwhelmingly the greatest significance this morning is that our thoughts are with anyone who is in the Caribbean right now, where Hurricane Irma has just passed over Barbuda, and it seems to be extraordinary. The damage we would assume is going to be devastating when all of this is said and done. The least consequential thing I can think of to tell you is that the Dolphins and Tampa Bay Buccaneers will not play Sunday in Miami, their season opener. That, of course, is very low on the list of overall concerns when it comes to this devastating storm. That said, we're a sports show, and so from the football side of it, Field, I'll start with you. What do you think would be the most reasonable decision to make by the league here? All they've decided is that they won't play Sunday in Miami. All other options seem to be on the table.
Here are the 2 options that I think most people would agree are most reasonable. One would be to find a neutral site game this weekend. The second would be to play a game in Week 11, which is when both teams have their bye weeks. Now, here are the cons of playing the game in Week 11 when they both have their byes. Basically, it's this. That means you're going to have 2 teams playing 16 straight games starting Sunday, September 17th, and potentially for longer than that because each one of these teams profiles as a potential playoff contender. Now, the cons of playing this week in a different site, whether it was Atlanta, which is not far away and has that new stadium, First of all, I don't think the NFL wants to open up the Atlanta Stadium with its first regular season game involving a team that is not actually from Atlanta. The other issue I think that the NFL might see is this. Miami is already playing a game in London this season that is a home game. If you are going to take 2 home games away from Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, that's a tough one right there. Sun Life Stadium, whatever the stadium's name.
No, it is Hard Rock Stadium.
Hard Rock
now.
Stadium in Miami.
25% of the season ticket holders home games.
Yeah, so I mean that's a major concession for the Dolphins and season ticket holders to have to make from a business standpoint. I tend to think that Week 11 makes the most sense. I get that these teams would have to play 16 games, but this is like the importance of this is a drop in the bucket relative to what the devastation, the potential devastation that this region could have to endure over the next handful of days here as Hurricane Irma continues to bolster in strength. I think that Week 11 makes the most sense. I understand it's imperfect, but you know something? Right now, when you get difficult circumstances, you have to find the best solution that's most amenable to the most amount of people. And it's not just a simple football issue. It's security, it's staffing, it's getting people to and from the game. There's so many layers to this.
What do you think, Mike?
Well, luckily, since I now see the stat, I played in both. I got in the league in 85, and there are no bye weeks.
Yep.
Bye weeks came into play in 1990, and there was an experimentation of the 2 bye week in the 1993 season. So you can play 16 games. All right, we're just not used to it right now. We have the byes.
In a row, yeah.
The best is Week 11. They both have the bye play. You play 16 weeks in a row. I mean, looking at what's going on, and that's would be considered the downside, I think everybody's going to survive it just fine as far as playing 16 games in a row. It seems to be the easiest thing to do.
I don't want to mitigate the importance of a bye week to an NFL player, but I'm just telling you, even if these teams play this weekend, come Week 11 when they have their bye, they're going to return from it in Week 12 and still be really sore. Like, that's the way, what percentage of players in the NFL is healthy by the end of the season? The answer is 0. They're all banged up. They're all bruised. This is a game that just takes a physical toll on your body. Again, I'm not trying to say the bye week has no meaning. At the same time, it's not as if playing 16 games is the worst case scenario given the circumstances involving Irma right now.
All right, let's do Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. And for that field, we'll let you get the first crack at this. The tweets are flying in. The hashtag is 4 in, 4 out. Again, every year since 1990 when they went to this new 12-team format in the playoffs, at least 4 teams have switched. So give me, first off, your 4 teams that you believe are going to get into the playoffs this year that were not a year ago.
4 teams that are going to get into the playoffs this season include, for me, the Tennessee Titans in the AFC South. It also includes Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC North.
Okay.
The Bengals would be a wild card team in the AFC. Arizona Cardinals in the NFC West.
Okay.
And last but not least, I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers. You know something? I'm just going to amend my thought there for a second. I'll stick with the Carolina Panthers in the NFC South.
Let us know who you were otherwise considering.
It really comes down to, does Minnesota or Detroit make things competitive in the end? I think Minnesota is going to be better than people realize right now. Defensively, they are outstanding, and they're extremely well coached by Mike Zimmer. So that's a team that I gave.
So you've got the Titans in, you've got the Bengals in, the Cardinals in, and the Panthers in.
Right.
Yeah.
And so who do they replace?
So in the AFC, that would replace the Miami Dolphins. Mm-hmm. Houston Texans would be the Tennessee Titans replacement.
Right.
And then in the NFC, I think it's going to be a more difficult road for the Detroit Lions.
Yep.
And then I suppose you'd have to, the Giants would be the last one there. But still, these are nitpicking right here.
They are. But you have to take out a 4th team. You're taking out the Giants.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. So Field Yates is putting in. He's the first one, but again, yours are all flying in. We'll start going through them here. Hashtag 4 in, 4 out. He's got in the Titans, Bengals, Cardinals, and Panthers. He's taken out the Dolphins, Lions, Texans, and Giants. I'll tell you right now, we agree. We'll do mine and Golik's here in a couple of minutes. I agree with you on 1 of your 4 in and 3 of your 4 out.
Yeah, I'm right in that area as well. Good start, though. I like that start.
Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Field is busy. He's got to go record the Fantasy Focus Football. Matthew Berry, Stefania Bell, Field Yates, weekdays on ESPN.com and the ESPN app. Thank you very much.
And a pit stop at SportsCenter along the way.
There you go.
Never a dull moment.
Very busy man in his suit. Back in just a flash. John Gruden next. Mike and Mike.
First time skydiving?
Sure is.
Okay, you just open the door like this and you jump. Oh, wait.
Should we be in tandem?
Tandem? That's a great idea.
Are you a certified instructor?
No,
wouldn't take chances with an uncertified skydiving instructor. Don't do it with your finances. Find a certified financial planner professional today at letsmakeaplan.org. CFP. Work with the highest standard.
America, it's time for some straight talk. You love your phone. Look at you. You hardly put it down. But you don't love that expensive wireless plan, do you? So what if I told you can keep that phone, network, and number 2 for a lot less? Well, this is me telling you. It's time to switch to Straight Talk, guys. Bring your own phone and get unlimited plans starting at just $45 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks. Straight Talk Wireless. Only at Walmart.
Savings may vary. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
We're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And in just a few minutes, they will include John Gruden, who is back for another fabulous season of football conversation with us. We're looking forward to that. His opening Monday night game will be, this coming week, will be the Saints and the Vikings, which is right off the bat, Adrian Peterson against his former team.
How about that, yeah.
A lot of intrigue there. 4 in, 4 out is the hashtag today. The 4 teams you believe, because it happens every year since they went to this playoff format, and that's 27 seasons ago. At least 4 new teams get in, and thus 4 teams go out. Are you ready to do your 4 in, 4 out?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we do those, and then we'll get John in here. And obviously the Zeke Elliott decision, which we spent just about the entire first hour discussing, is the big story today, and we'll get back to it. But let's do it here. Hashtag 4 in, 4 out. Golic, give me the 4 teams you believe will make the playoffs this year that did not make it a year ago.
I believe Tennessee will make the playoffs this year. I believe... I'll stay in the AFC. Denver will make the playoffs this year.
Did you copy my list? Are you looking at my list?
No, I had this picked before you started your little conversation of can you have 3 in a division. Okay? All right?
Okay,
fair enough.
enough.
Went down that road?
All righty.
So it was stacked it down before. So Tennessee, Denver, Tampa Bay.
Uh-oh. We have the same 3 so far.
You're not going to have the same here.
Okay.
Minnesota.
All right, you're correct. I do not have that. So
why do you give me the buzz on that? Just because it didn't match yours?
Correct.
Are you serious?
Thus, it's obviously wrong.
It happened to
I was really only hitting the ding because it matched mine. So I couldn't.
You were doing it by pick.
I couldn't think of any other way to demonstrate the fact that it did not agree with mine.
Whatever, pool boy. What's yours?
Golic is putting in the Titans, the Bucks, the Broncos, and the Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
I am putting in the Tennessee Titans, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Denver Broncos, and the Philadelphia Eagles. I believe the Eagles and Carson Wentz will take a huge step forward with the new weapons around him.
I was thinking about them. It was a choice between them and Minnesota. I was thinking long and hard about that one.
People, you know what? When the push came to shove, I went with the quarterback that I trusted more. I think Wentz is going to have a big year. All right, that means 4 teams, Golic, are coming out. Who are you taking out of this year's playoffs?
In the AFC, I'm taking out Miami. I'm taking out Houston. I'm taking out Detroit. And while the stats don't bear this out, I asked Hembo to look this up, and it is very interesting. You look at Super Bowl teams that lose, what they do the next year. From 2001 to 2008, teams coming off a Super Bowl loss had a combined winning percentage of under 500 and 1 playoff appearance and a single 10-win season. Over the last 8 years, though, the Panthers were the only team coming off a Super Bowl loss that didn't win at least 10 games. So that it's now in favor of you lose a Super Bowl, you still have a good year next year. On that note, I took out Atlanta.
Hugely wrong.
Okay.
No, no way in the world I'm taking out the Falcons. So again, we have 3 in which we agree. I took out the Dolphins. I took out the Lions. I took out the Texans, which I did very hesitantly.
Yeah.
I did only because you cannot put 7 teams in from the AFC and 5 teams in from the NFC. It just doesn't work that way. I did not want to take out the Texans because I do think they're going to get representative quarterback play, and I think they have the best defense in the conference.
You could have left him in and not put in the other team you put in.
But I just couldn't figure out a way to do it. I didn't have 3 NFC teams I wanted to put in instead. I'm not taking out the Falcons. So, because they'll be playing almost half their season without their best player, I took out the Cowboys. Everything went their way last year.
Yeah,
every if you were to use a basketball analogy, every loose ball went their way last year. They won a bunch of crazy games last season. I believe they'll wind up playing 6 games this year without Zeke Elliott. I know it's a ridiculous pick, and I'm sure I'll look like an idiot for making it. but I needed to take someone in the NFC out, and I wasn't taking out Atlanta. I think Atlanta is better than Dallas.
I think I'm making a horrible mistake by taking out Atlanta, but I never think 4 new teams are going to be in each year, and it's been that way.
All right, so those are our hashtag 4 in, 4 out. Let's hear from you all morning long, and as we do that and prepare for you, it is our delight to bring back from Monday Night Football our friend John Gruden, who is back with the first of his weekly appearances through this football season. He joins us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Good morning, John Gruden.
Hey, good morning, guys.
It's been a very long time since we've heard your voice, and a pleasure to do it. Let's dive right in, and we'll go on the field in a second, but there is one off-the-field situation that I would like to get your coaching expertise on, and that is the Dolphins and the Buccaneers have their opener. It was scheduled to be played this Sunday in Miami. The one thing they have decided is that they cannot play there based upon Hurricane Irma, and I think everyone agrees that that's the right decision. But they basically seem to have 2 options here. One of them is play the game Sunday in a neutral location. The other would be they both have a bye week, week 11, so they could just reschedule the game for that week. The downside is the 2 teams would have to play 16 consecutive weeks. What is your sense of which would be the better way to go here? If you were coaching one of the teams, would you rather play in a neutral location week 1, or would you rather miss week 1 and then play 16 consecutive weeks starting the second week of the year?
Well, I think football's secondary right now. If you track this storm, it's a devastating possibility for all of us here in Florida. We're all concerned. I would move the game to week 11. I think families become priority here. These players have families. These coaches, the organization has families. They need to make sure they are safe and evacuated if necessary. And I would move the game without a doubt to week 11. I realize it could compromise them having to have no bye week during 16 straight weeks, but safety comes first at times like this.
And it's a great point, and you're absolutely right, and we have mentioned that here, that the storm and everybody's safety does come first. Certainly there was the sports aspect to it, but your point is a great one. Instead of the players going to a neutral place in week 1 and flying away and leaving their families back, in Florida where this could be devastating. So I'm in complete agreement. We talked about this, that, when they both have their byes, week 11 would be the best time to play. How about, John, in the beginning of the season, from a coaching standpoint, how did you go into that first game from a mental standpoint, from talking to the team, how you were building up the team to start the season, as opposed to John Gruden talking to a team before, like, week 8?
Mike, I think times are different now with the way that the collective bargaining agreement has impacted how we practice. It's just the first couple games, I think, of the regular season are an extension of the preseason. I'm counting the number of reps that the veteran players have taken in these 4 preseason games, and it's incredible how few they are. Conditioning is the number one thing I talked about. Secondly, we're going to have to use our entire roster. We're going to have to substitute on the defensive line. We're going to have to use a number of players because these players have not gone wire to wire. You played defensive line in the NFL. You had to go out there and play 55, 56 snaps. You couldn't tap out because there's only 47 of you available on game day. We're not allowing 90 guys to dress like we've seen in the preseason. So I emphasize conditioning, substitutions, and obviously tackling because none of these men have done anything full speed really on the preseason tape that I've seen.
It is a new era here. Mike and Mike, John Gruden with us. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. All right, let's go on the field. A bunch of interesting things. Let's start with your game, Saints and Vikings, with Adrian Peterson in an extremely unfamiliar New Orleans uniform against his former teammates. I've been reading some stories about how they're utilizing him coming out of the backfield, catching more passes, which is something we've not traditionally associated with Adrian Peterson. What is your expectation of the role he will play in that New Orleans offense?
I'm really excited to find this out. Sean Payton's a good friend of mine. We have worked together in the past. We've collaborated on a lot of football, but I have no idea how he's going to manage this. I think Ingram is a very good back. I think the kid they drafted out of Tennessee is a kid that they got to get on the field, Kamara. He was awesome against San Diego in the preseason. He's a Darren Sproles, Reggie Bush type player. Peterson, the emotions that he's going to have going home, having to learn this new offense, the protections, the routes, catching the ball, all that stuff is going to be a challenge, but it's going to be a difficult process, I think, for Sean Payton. But if you look back, Mike, to when the Saints won the Super Bowl, they were able to use three distinctly different backs. They used Reggie Bush, they used Pierre Thomas, and they used Mike Bell. No one remembers he even played, as their hammer. And I think Sean Payton is replicating that Super Bowl team with Adrian Peterson as the hammer. He's going to use Ingram's versatility, and he's going to use Kamara, much like he used Reggie Bush. And he has the ability to use all three. He's a very creative play caller.
Boy, do that, and how much that'll help a passing game that's already a fantastic passing game. Looking at a situation in Cleveland, not so much the Browns and their history, but the fact that you're starting a rookie quarterback. How different is it for you as a coach going into a season and the talk to that quarterback and to the team when veterans know you're starting a rookie quarterback, you're gonna go through some growing pains as opposed to going in with a veteran quarterback?
It's tough. There's no question it's tough, but it's also tough to go out there like they did last year with a quarterback that wasn't performing. The Browns have not had quality quarterback play in a long time. Robert Griffin, McCown, Kessler. After doing a game in Cleveland in the preseason, it's obvious that Kaiser has more talent than they've had at the position in a long time. The big question is, how fast can Hugh Jackson fast-track him? The problem is he's got to open up with Pittsburgh and then Baltimore. That's about as hard as it gets.
Mike and Mike, John Gruden is with us. Other places right there in your home of Tampa, a lot of people watched Hard Knocks, so they've seen a lot of the Buccaneers and an expectation for a jump in Jameis Winston. Now, again, we may not see him week one based upon what may happen between the Dolphins and the Bucs, but generally speaking, there are a lot of people, myself included, who feel Winston could be the next guy to take a step forward and become one of the top-level quarterbacks in the National Football League. As you've watched his development, what will that take? What does he need to do to become one of the top 4 or 5 guys at the position in the sport?
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I've seen him practice. We did their game in the preseason against Jacksonville. There's not a lot that you shouldn't like with this man. He is athletic. He's tough. He can make all the throws. He's a dynamic leader. He's 23 years old with 8,000 yards passing and over 50 touchdowns. It's incredible. What he needs to do, in my opinion, is minimize the risk on a few plays per game. He's a little bit like Brett Favre as a young quarterback when we had him in Green Bay. Some of the most spectacular plays he makes on his own. But he also makes some very careless mistakes. Those are the damage plays that he's got to minimize. If he can eliminate those crazy turnovers, and he had one against Jacksonville in the preseason, he had one against Cleveland in the preseason. If he can minimize the negative plays, the really catastrophic turnover plays, he can take Tampa back to the promised land.
So we look at a team in Cleveland with a brand-new quarterback and growing again, a team in Tampa Bay who's on the rise with a young star quarterback. How about, and again, from a coach's side of it, a team like Arizona? Players know the window of opportunity, where it's open, how close it is to being closed. You got a couple of guys in Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald getting ready to walk into the 19th hole and have a drink and call it a career. I mean, that window is closing and just about closed. So from a coaching standpoint, does that put more pressure on you and that team saying we have to get this thing done now?
I don't think you can look at it like that. I think the reality is there's a lot of teams in football that have veteran quarterbacks, Eli Manning, Drew Brees. There's a number of Phillip Rivers guys that have windows closing, Tom Brady, but you got to understand where we are as a team. What do we have to do to win? We clearly have a very good defense in Arizona. We've got one of the best runners in football. They have to do everything they can, I think, to help this offensive line. How good are they? They have issues, I think, up front on offense. Can they block the Seahawks, the Rams, the teams in their division? Because there's some really formidable fronts that they got to deal with.
Mike and Mike, John Gruden is with us again, looking forward to week one in the NFL season, the Monday night doubleheader. He's got the Saints and the Vikings in the early game. Carson Wentz is another young quarterback to keep an eye on. They went out and they got a bunch of weapons for him to work with. The jump forward for him from season 1 to season 2, as you've watched him during this offseason, studied the tape that you have, what does Wentz need to do to take the next step forward for an Eagles team that might have a playoff team around him?
Well, I think Wentz, I've always said second-year players show the most improvement. Second-year coaches, second-year players at every position show the most improvement. Fortunately for Wentz, he's going to be in the same system with the same play caller. He's got the same center. So the battery, he and Kelsey, will be able to communicate clearly, get to the plays that they need to. I think his recognition of defenses has to improve, which it will in year two. His communication has to improve. He's got to get to the right routes. When Alshon Jeffrey has a one-on-one over there, go to him. And he's got to execute better in crunch time situations, third down, red zone, 2 minutes. Those are the three things, I think, the recognition, the communication, and the overall execution at crunch time.
Over on the other side of the ball, Golick always says the most important players on the field are the defensive tackles.
Without question.
So let me ask you about one of those. Sheldon Richardson traded to the Seattle Seahawks, already an elite defense. Now they add in a young guy who I know a lot of people across America probably haven't seen a ton of Sheldon Richardson because the Jets have generally been bad since he got there. But, I mean, I'm here to tell you he is right. He's one of the best players in the NFL, and he's young, and you put him in the middle of that defense. What do you think the addition of Sheldon Richardson does for the Seahawks defense?
I hope it rejuvenates him. I think a couple years ago, I would agree he was a really good player. He disappeared to me the last couple seasons. I don't know what happened to Richardson. They had a formidable front in New York. Unfortunately, that band is splitting up, but they lose Snacks Harrison. Now they lose Richardson. I hope Richardson gets rejuvenated playing next to Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett and playing for Pete Carroll because he does have a lot of talent. And he needs to get it all out on the grass so we can see it. It'll be awesome if he comes through for Seattle. They'll be hard to deal with.
Now, for the Rams, they have, Aaron Donald out. He's holding out. They're not going to play in week one. Who knows how long this holdout's going to go. Best interior lineman in the game, I think. So I know as a coach, you have to say all we can do is coach the guys that are here. We have to go on without them. But let's be honest for a moment. When you go home in a private moment, are you just like, I cannot believe we don't have this guy on the field with us?
Yeah, I probably would be. I mean, I was fortunate to be on a team with Warren Sapp and Reggie White, great defensive tackles. And if one of those men weren't going to show up because they were holding out, I'd probably go have a little conversation with our general manager. Maybe we should get this man in here because we're going to have a hard time winning without him.
On that team, I was fascinated by some of the comments that Louis Riddick has made as we're sort of leading into this regular season here. Jared Goff had such a really difficult first year, but Louis has been very encouraged by some of the things that he has seen. Have you seen similar things? What have you seen in whatever you've been able to of Jared Goff in preparation for year two for the number one pick?
I like Goff in the second preseason game against the Raiders. I didn't like the Raiders on defense in that game either. There were guys wide open, blown coverages. It was sloppy by Oakland. I didn't like Goff in the third preseason game against San Diego. I thought he was erratic. It'll be interesting to see where he is. This new offense, this new head coach, Sean McVay, will help him, I believe. How good is their offensive line? That'll be the issue. That has been the issue for years in the Rams organization. Can they protect the passer and get Gurley going so they can get some balance back in this attack?
Well, we'll find out. Again, week one is upon us, and again, the Monday night doubleheader, John and company have the Saints and the Vikings, and it's followed by the Chargers and the Broncos. John, we're looking forward to it. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, John.
Hey, thank you, guys, and hopefully we get some rock and roll on next week.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
See, now we didn't have the song this week.
I know.
They said to me, we have no Gruden's Groove this week, and I knew John was going to miss it.
We failed on that.
And if there's one thing you don't want John mad.
Nope.
It's week one, and we've made John
We
mad.
already are in makeup mode.
Absolutely right. Yeah. John Gruden, by the way, was on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. So, again, the hashtag this morning is 4 in, 4 out. Give us the 4 teams because it happens every single year. The 4 teams you believe will get into the playoffs this year that weren't a year ago, and the 4 teams they will replace. The top story in the NFL this morning is Harold Henderson upholding the 6-game suspension for Zeke Elliott, but the decision made that based upon the timing of all of this, that he'll be allowed to play week 1 against the Giants. And then in theory, depending on how things go in court, he would then be suspended from weeks 2 through 7. I think the expectation is that the legal process is going to take a little time to wind itself down.
Well, I mean, we're going to get a decision by 5 o'clock Friday from at least if there's going to be a stay or not, correct? That's what I've gathered yesterday?
Let me read you this.
Ryan Smith, our legal analyst, will join us a little after 9 o'clock Eastern time to square a lot of this away. But that was my thought, that we're going to get some answers on Friday by 5 o'clock.
Okay, here's exactly what I have. This is Kevin Seifert put together, and I recommend this for you on ESPN.com. He put together like here's what you need to know about the Zeke Elliott situation. With regard specifically to that, he said the NFL issued Elliott a 6-game suspension last month. The NFL's designated arbitrator upheld the full discipline Tuesday night. In anticipation of this outcome, the NFL players filed a motion Friday for a TRO. If granted, the TRO would freeze the suspension while Elliott and or the NFLPA pursue a lawsuit to get the suspension overturned permanently. By Friday afternoon, as you say, we should know about the TRO. The hearing took place Tuesday evening in U.S. District Court in Sherman, Texas. But because it will take a few days to decide whether to grant the TRO, that's why Elliott is allowed to play on Sunday, even if the motion is denied. So if the TRO is granted, then we go into who the heck knows.
If it's granted, he keeps playing while this goes through court.
Right.
If it's not granted, he starts serving his suspension.
It's week 2.
Yes.
Correct. But the point is, if it is granted, we go into who the heck knows.
Yeah.
Because now do we wind up in front of court? Do we wind up with this thing getting pushed back?
Well,
Does it wind up getting decided week 5, week 9? Is it like Brady where it doesn't even get decided until next year?
The one thing we do know of the who knows or what we do know, Zeke's going to keep playing.
He will keep playing until something is ultimately rendered. Again, in the case of Brady, it took an entire season.
Right.
He was suspended the first 4 games of the next year already after all this happened.
Hey, everyone, Mike Golick here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT. Home. Safe home.
All right, we are Mike and Mike. Television ratings show that the opening weekend of college football was enormous. People loved it. People loved the games. They're watching like crazy. So we can talk a lot about NFL ratings and what they are and what the causes may be. Right now, people are watching college football like crazy, which means they're watching this man. Every Wednesday, it's Herbie with us on Mike and Mike. Good morning, Kirk Herbstreit.
Morning. How we doing?
Doing well.
We're doing great. I want to go back to your Saturday night game, Alabama and Florida State, which obviously was an extremely dramatic game and ended terribly for Florida State losing their quarterback. But let's start with Alabama. Their special teams were obviously spectacular. Their defense, as Nick Saban's are, always terrific. And there are 2 different ways to watch that game. I was watching it thinking to myself, boy, this Bama offense doesn't look like much. And Golick said to me, they're playing against the championship defense.
Yeah.
So, Herbie, what do we think we learned about the number 1 team in the country's offense Saturday night?
I tend to agree with Golick. I think as things play out, I think we'll look back and say that, boy, what a tough way to start for Alabama and Jalen Hurts and Brian Dable, the new OC. You're going up against basically an LSU defense with the defensive line that Florida State had. The secondary was playing pretty well. It was tough to get any continuity, any rhythm going, just because of how good Florida State was defensively. Think about it, a lot of times Alabama starting in plus territory, still couldn't come up with any points. So I think before we just get all panicked and worried about Jalen Hurts and Alabama, I think Alabama's offense is going to be fine. They're loaded in the backfield. They've got some young receivers to go along with Calvin Ridley. The offensive line, I think, will be fine. I'm a fan of Jalen Hurts personally. I think they're going to work out the kinks. They kind of know where their strengths and concerns are right now, and I think they'll go from here. And if you look at their schedule, it's gonna ease up, and it's going to allow them to really start to kind of mold this offense to where they want it to be before maybe they get their next challenge.
The athletic ability on both defenses in that game was ridiculous, watching those teams play. Yeah. And unfortunately for Bama, they lose a couple of linebackers. We know Florida State loses a quarterback. Talk to us from there, Herbie, from the core. You were a quarterback. So now in a situation there where they lose, you're going into the second week of your season, your starting quarterback is gone. Georgia is coming up to Notre Dame. Your starter is out. You have a rookie in there, even though you're more of a running team. Texas A&M, they lose their quarterback in the third quarter of a game that they lose in a bad loss for them and a comeback for UCLA. So from that position, teams going into that next week, all of a sudden, all this preparation you do in week 2, you don't have your quarterback on the field anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. It's a tough thing to have to deal with. You work the entire offseason on a certain style of offense, and a lot of it's built around that quarterback. And, I think that's why, as a coordinator and a head coach, you always try to get that second quarterback ready just in case, and you hope that second quarterback realizes how important it is to get the mental reps and realize that he's a play away. One thing I would just say, because I heard a lot of this yesterday, just a reaction to Florida State playing in the game. And, man, if they just wouldn't have played in that game, they wouldn't have had to deal with losing DeAndre Francois. And what's the sense in playing this game? It just doesn't make any sense. I almost wanted to come through the radio and grab people because that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. That the kid got hurt because they played Alabama, or why play in these games. Go in the locker room and ask a player who they want to play in those games. To make it sound like it makes no sense to play in those games, I think you're just out of touch with reality. That's number one. It's great for the players to play in those games. They want to play in those games. They don't want to play, Northeast Louisiana State in their first game. It helps with the entire offseason to get excited about playing in the game. It's just so easy to look back at a game and say, man, if they wouldn't have played in that game, he wouldn't have gotten hurt. Well, what do you say when a guy gets hurt in practice? Geez, we got to stop practicing. Guys are getting hurt in practice. What do you say when a guy gets hurt walking down the street and he trips on a curb and you better stop taking walks down the sidewalk. You're getting hurt taking walks down the sidewalk. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, that Florida State should have known better. They shouldn't have played Alabama in the first game. Please don't say that.
Mike and Herbie is with us. Game days in Columbus this week. Oklahoma and Ohio State is a huge one. Before we get to that, I want to get to Michigan. Herbie, when you were in studio with us a couple of weeks ago, we got into a little discussion about Harbaugh and sort of the machine that he's putting together there, if you will, with recruiting, because they lose basically everybody from last year. And here they come, and at least for 1 week, that defense looks extraordinarily stout. What did you see from Michigan week 1 against a Florida team that, again, was playing without so many players who were suspended?
If you remember, every show that I was on before they played a game, I said that Michigan lost 43 seniors. They lost 10 guys on defense, and with Don Brown as their defensive coordinator, they are going to be at least as good, if not better, than they were a year ago. I am not surprised at all with how they played. Rashawn Gary up front, Maurice Hurst. They've got a defensive front that is going to be ferocious. It's not, wow, Florida's terrible. It's a little bit of maybe both. Right now, Florida's really trying to find out who they are. They had some suspensions, still trying to figure out the quarterback spot. Michigan's going to do this to a lot of people that they play. It's a 10 or 11-win team. The idea that people fell for, we don't know who our quarterback is right now. Meanwhile, behind the curtain, Wilton Spates lost, 20 pounds. He's looking great. He's probably the leader of the team. I thought, he didn't necessarily play crazy good against a pretty good Florida defense, but I think he's only going to get better with the players around him. He's got a lot of youth around him. What's that old saying? They are who we thought they are. That's to me, that's who Michigan is. Michigan is going to be. Jim Harbaugh has recruited, and they are a perennial top 7 team year in and year out. It's the culture that he's created. It's the recruiting that he's going out and doing. I don't care if they lose 43 guys every year and 10 starters every year. Next year, you're going to open up the magazine, and there's Michigan. It's just they're one of those teams. They're no longer in the rebuilding mode. They just reload. And so that was not a, wow, Florida's terrible. That was Florida's got some issues on offense, and like I said, with the suspended players. And Michigan is, in my opinion, they're exactly who I thought they'd be.
Looking at a couple of rank games, leading off, obviously, number 2 Ohio State hosting number 5 Oklahoma. I know game day will be there in Columbus. Last year, Ohio State put them on them, I think, 45-24. What's interesting to me, maybe because as a former D lineman, the entire Oklahoma offensive line is back, and they're monsters. They average about 325. And the entire 2-deep D-line for Ohio State is back this year. So a lot of people may look at that and say, well, maybe expect the same outcome as last year. I don't necessarily agree with that. So give us a little thumbnail on this one.
Man, you're dead on. I can't wait to watch that matchup. And I also can't just wait to watch the energy from Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield tends to be forgotten a little bit with all the other talk about all the other quarterbacks that are, but the NFL and all that. Baker Mayfield is one of my favorite guys in the country because he plays with a big chip on his shoulder. His playing style is like a young Brett Favre. I mean, I'm going back to Southern Miss or early Green Bay Packers. Brett Favre. You never know what he's going to do. He's going to scramble, he's going to do a shovel pass, or he's going to run out of bounds and the guy's going to touch his arm. He's going to look at him like, what, we got a problem here? We got a problem? Like, he is just that guy. And I can't wait to see after they lose to Ohio State. He already has come out and said publicly, they're out there singing on our field. We've been thinking about this for a year. Ohio State went in there and ripped their heart out, and they were sitting there at 1-2 on the year. And they went on to win 10 straight games. So I think they're a different team, new head coach with Lincoln Riley. Bob Stoops out. They've been hearing about it, what Ohio State did to them for an entire year. Now they're going to Columbus. And you really kind of found a matchup within the game is that a veteran offensive line with Baker against Ohio State's clearly their strength, arguably the best defensive line in college football. And it's in Columbus, and you get the third down, and it's going to be tough on that offensive line. They have an issue at times in pass protection, and that's Ohio State's strength, rushing the quarterback. So what will Lincoln Riley do? What we have learned from Indiana and what they did with Richard Lago and that group of receivers to try to help them minimize the impact that the Ohio State pass rush and defensive line could have on that game, because that part of it will be a lot of fun to watch.
Give me a quick thumbnail on another rank. Notre Dame just jumped into the rankings, and they're going to host Georgia coming up to South Bend. Georgia, a team with 5 losses last year. Notre Dame 4 and 8 losses last year. Both teams trying to get back into it, and we know how Georgia loves to run the ball. Quick thumbnail on this one.
How good did Brandon Wimbush look and taking over now? I mean, we'll find out, against this week against a much tougher defense. But, I think the Notre Dame team this year has a real chance. I thought the defense with Mike Elko taking over looked a lot different. I think that's obviously a good thing for them. With Georgia, there's been so much talk about the injury to their quarterback, Jacob Eason, and what does that mean for them? Is that going to be something that could be devastating, or, is that something that changes their offensive approach with Jake Fromm now coming in, who's a true freshman? I personally think Fromm is tougher to defend. His style is more of a dual guy, is tougher than Jacob Eason, who's obviously more drop back guy. So now you've got to deal with Fromm, who can move around a little bit. So I think that's a little bit more of a challenge. But taking a young quarterback on the road in that environment, how does he respond to that? And can Notre Dame's defense, after an entire kind of offseason of rebuilding that unit, this is where we're kind of going to really see where they are, because having to defend Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, the athletic ability, the dogs, we'll find out not only is Notre Dame ready for Georgia, but is Notre Dame completely a different team, and are they going to be more competitive in 2017 in general?
Bunch of good games this weekend. Again, maybe the best. Oklahoma at Ohio State. Game day will be there, and the game will be primetime Saturday night on ABC. Thank you, Herbie. We're looking forward to it.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
First time skydiving?
Sure is.
Okay, you just open the door like this, and you jump.
Oh, wait. Should we be like in tandem?
Tandem? That's a great idea.
Are you a certified instructor?
No, but I love parachutes, and I love people. Here we go.
You wouldn't take chances with an uncertified skydiving instructor. Don't do it with your finances. Find a certified financial planner professional today at letsmakeaplan.org. CFP. Work with the highest standard.
Question is, will Zeke Elliott be part of that perfect lineup week 1? He will play Sunday night against the Giants.
Marguerite asked the question, no defense of Elliott, with domestic violence. This is more a question. When the legal system declines to charge, is it fair or arrogant for the NFL to punish? Thoughts. And the thought on this is that they're almost in a no-win situation. So imagine if a spouse truly is abused and then they don't want to press charges. Right? They don't want to talk to the police. A lot of times there was abuse, but the police say we have nothing to go on, so we're dropping the case. Or, if a situation where all of a sudden you don't have a witness there anymore because maybe they were paid off and not to be a witness anymore, and the police have nothing to go on, so there's no case. So if the NFL just said, well, that happened, we're not going to do anything, they would get crushed. They would get crushed to say, the players can just buy their way out of it, and then they won't get in trouble in the league. That's what would happen. They would get crushed for it the other way. So I'm with them. Even though you're not built to defend all of domestic violence and be the perfect arbiter of what should happen, because God knows they struggled in doing it. But in my mind, you absolutely should have your investigation. And if it's compared to a 100% guilty, not guilty, as opposed to a civil suit proving 51% to 49% and finding punishment in there. So to me, I have absolutely no problem with them wanting to do this.
There's a lot to it, and I'm very happy that we have Will Cain coming in just a minute here, because for those of you who heard Will with us last week, his legal expertise came in extraordinarily handy. And the first question I'm going to ask Will when he's here right off the top of the hour, and he can hear me right now so he can prepare for it, is exactly that. Should the National Football League, and I don't want to prejudice the answer by asking the question, it's a legitimate question. Should the National Football League be conducting these kinds of investigations on their own? Because I see both sides. I honestly see both sides of it.
But you agree they would get ripped the other way too, right?
Of course, and that's the reason. In theory, you are policing is the wrong word, because it is the definition of not involving the police. But you are taking care of your own business. You are taking care of matters of your own. And again, it should be reminded once more, we're not talking about deflated footballs here.
No, we're not.
I was more than willing to yell and scream about the ridiculousness of Deflategate, because at the end of the day, what we were arguing about was there 1 pound per square inch too little air in the footballs. This is an entirely different matter. All this Twitter, by the way, as always, through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Nothing makes up for your football obsession like a surprise from 1-800-Flowers.com. When you order a dozen multicolored roses for $29.99, you get an extra bouquet for free. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. We also have a bunch of Twitter on the Dolphins, the rescheduling of the Dolphin game. Dolphins home Sunday will not be played. They're scheduled to play Tampa. What they have determined based upon the hurricane is that they will not play it there then. Now, will they play it instead in Week 11 when both they and the Buccaneers have a bye week? Mike, you said you think that's the right decision.
I do think that's the right decision. Now, to keep within line of everything to play in Week 1, I get doing that, but I think John Gruden, and I didn't think of this, shame on me. Obviously, the storm is the most important, but I think what he said is important. You're having players, if you went and played in a neutral site in Week 1, they'd be flying out Friday or Saturday, and it's supposed to hit, Saturday or Sunday. Their families are left behind. I mean, they're not there for their families should they need to either get out or do what they need to do, prepare for this storm in some way. So that's another reason I would agree to say it is a far less of a negative to say you have to play 16 weeks in a row, which we've done before 1990, before the bye weeks came into play, than to play Week 1.
Let me just throw this at you. When is their London game? Don't they have a London game in there someplace? And is that because it doesn't look to me like the London game follows their bye week. And normally the teams that have a home game in London,
right? It normally does.
And
yeah,
normally a bye week follows that. Yeah. Now they may have asked not to have that this time around. I need to get that. I'm looking on the schedule, but it doesn't immediately say it because I have people pointing out they'd be playing 16 games in a row with a trip to London and not playing in Miami until October. We'll get to the bottom of that for you quickly, and then we'll get Will Cain in here. A whole lot more to do as we continue in just a moment. Mike and Mike.
First time skydiving?
Sure is.
Okay, you just open the door like this and you jump.
Wait, should we be like in tandem?
Tandem? That's a great idea!
Are you a certified instructor?
No, but I love parachutes and I love people! Here we go!
You wouldn't take chances with an uncertified skydiving instructor. Don't do it with your finances. Find a certified financial planner professional today at letsmakeaplan.org. CFP. Work with the highest standard.